Hey guys, now in this video we're going to be talking about section 3.3, which is changes to equilibrium. So we've already talked about the differences in the shifts in the demand and the supply, but now we're going to talk a little bit more about what actually will happen to the market. So remember, equilibrium is where we're having that handshake going on, right? Because you're buying something, you are agreeing to buy at that price, and the firm is also agreeing to sell it at that price. That's what equilibrium is. But when we have a shift of something, more income or less income, or we have a change in taste and preferences, if the price of a substitute changes, a price of a complement changes, if our expectation changes, or the things with supply, right? Something with weather, something with input prices, something with technology, right? All of these things are shifting the demand and supply. What does that do to price? So when it comes to changes to the equilibrium, what we're going to do is a four-step process. And this four-step process is to determine how an economic event affects equilibrium price and quantity. So the step one is going to be drawing the demand and supply model before the economic change happens. Basically what we're trying to do here is we're trying to draw the demand and the supply, and then you'll draw the price. Remember, P0, Q0. This is our starting point. And I like to do D0 and S0 just because I know there's going to be a shift happening. So I want to know what is the old, so D0, right, or ground zero, whatever makes sense to you. So the old, and then what is going to be the new. So step one, we did. We drew the demand and supply. Step two is determine whether the economic change affects demand or supply. So that goes back to what happened, and then you figuring out, okay, is that me or is that the business, right, the firms? And that's really going to help you out determining if it's demand or supply. So if the situation came up, a consumer has more income, obviously it's going to be demand. If businesses are wanting to improve technology, well, then that's going to be the supply side. Now, there's going to be a little bit more complicated ones that are coming up, but if you go back to, okay, does that change me, right, about what would I buy, or would that change something a business might do, that's going to help you determine if it's demand or supply. And so that's the second thing, is figuring out demand or supply, because then we can figure out, okay, which curve is it? Then we're going to decide whether the effect causes a shift to the right or to the left. And then we're going to sketch the new curve on the graph. So once you figure it out, okay, well that means demand. Am I buying more stuff or less stuff? That's the next part after you do the demand, is right or left, more or less. Now, when we say demand up, we're meaning you're buying more stuff. So remember how over here is infinity and over here is zero. So if it's more, you're going to go to the right. And if it's less, so like less supply, less demand, you're going to be shifting to the left, right or left. And so that's what we have to do next, is figuring out, does it go right or does it go left? So that's step three. And step four is identify the new equilibrium and compare it to the original. So let's say it's more income for what kind of good? Normal good. And what would happen then? If it's a normal good, income goes up, what happens to demand? What would I normally do? If I had more money, I would buy more stuff. So therefore, I'm going to shift my demand to the right. So this will be D1. Now, does my income and me willing to pay more for something, does that change supply? Okay, that's a very valid question. Did anything change on the business side? No. Right? Like, picture this. I'm on the outside of HEB and I have more money, right? And I'm coming in to buy more stuff. Did anything happen on the HEB side? Like, did anything, technology, did they change their input prices? Did something happen with the weather? No, right? So nothing happened with the supply side. So we're not going to shift that one at all. And so by having more demand, we're going to shift it to the right. And then step 4 said we were going to be looking at the new price. So this will be P1 and Q1. Now, what happened to price? Looking at P0 and P1, you can see that it is increasing. And then looking at Q0 and Q1, it's increasing as well. So what happened where we would have more demand? Well, price would go up and quantity goes up as well. And that just makes sense, right, all the way around, right? Because I'm buying more stuff. And because I'm buying more stuff, obviously quantity is going up. And then because I'm buying more, I'm just wanting to buy it, I am willing to pay more for it to get it. So price up, quantity up. And the graph is really going to help us see that. So that is the 4-step process whenever something comes up about a change in equilibrium. Those are the 4 things you're going to go through. Now, let's look at the following situations and kind of figure out what's going on there. If we had good weather conditions for the salmon market, what would that change? So the first step is drawing the graph. Alrighty, so let's draw the graph here. And what are we missing here? We're missing price, quantity, we need a demand curve, D0, we need a supply curve, S0. Are we done? No, because we need the original price and quantity, P0 and Q0. Then we need to look at good weather conditions for the salmon market. So how would good weather conditions change this market? Is it really a demand thing? I mean, it could be, but what is it more likely? Like if we were looking at salmon and we had good weather, more than likely it's going to be for the supply side. Because if you were out on a boat and you were trying to fish for salmon and you had good weather, you could stay out there longer and you could catch more fish. And so by having more time out on the boat catching fish, this is going to increase the supply of salmon. So that's the second thing, determining if it's supply or demand. And by having good weather conditions, we're going to say that this is supply. Now, is it a right or left shift? Well, by having good weather conditions, we can have more fish, so that's more supply. That's going to be shift to the right. So we're going to have the supply curve shift to the right, and this will be S1. Notice how I'm drawing an arrow to let me know, and anybody, know what's happening. So, shift it to the right, and we draw the new supply curve S1. The next thing is figuring out the new equilibrium price and quantity. So it's going to be very confusing because you're going to want to look at this and you're going to be, oh, there's 3 curves and it's too confusing. Make it simple, okay? Only look at what is actually happening. S1 and D0. Remember, nothing happened with demand here. We're only saying that this affects supply. So we're looking at S1 and D0. Where are S1 and D0? Where are they agreeing? And that happens right here. And that would be P1 and Q1. Now, to make this easier, what I like to do is, again, I like to draw arrows to let me know what is happening. So what happened to price? Price went down. And what happened to quantity? Well, quantity went to the right, so quantity goes up. So because supply increased, we have a lower price and a higher quantity. And that kind of makes sense, right? Because if there were a lot more of a good, what happens to the value of one of them? They would go down, right? Like if we had very few diamonds, what's happening to the price of diamonds? It goes up. But if we had a lot of diamonds all at once, right, then the value of each diamond would go down. And that's how supply is the more supply you have, the lower the price is going to be. Now, let's take a look at the second one. Increased preference to use digital news sources for the print news media market. So, if we're talking about print news, that's the actual physical newspaper, and there's an increased preference for the digital news. What happens for the market for the newspaper? Okay, well, if people are buying more of that, what happens to the demand here? The demand here is going down. And if you're wondering how does this change supply, right? Well, we'll go back. What is happening here? The big change is that people are buying more of the digital news. And so that would change the demand for the newspaper. So for that one, right, so let's go number 2 here. We need the price, quantity. We have D0, S0, and are we done? No, because we need P0 and Q0. This is a fantastic way to start your graph. I have everything labeled here, and the main thing I want everything labeled is I want a lot of people to understand what I'm doing, right? This is the price, this is the quantity, here's the demand and supply. Now, because people are buying less of the newspaper, right, that's a decrease in the demand, so it's going to be shifting it to the left. So I'm going to shift it to the left. Again, I'm using arrows. And then finally, step 4 would be finding the new equilibrium, which is Q1, P1. And as you can see here, price goes down, quantity goes down. So with the newsprint, if the demand goes down, price goes down, quantity goes down as well. Easy stuff. Now, here's the last one, and this one's going to be the interesting one. What does an increase in the labor compensation as well as an increase in the digital communications suggest about the continued viability of the postal services? Let me break it down for you. What would happen if the postal workers got paid more for working? Then what would happen if people were switching to emails instead of letters? Okay, and both of those are happening at the same time. And if you're wondering, well, what about ceteris paribus, right? Okay, that is true when we're talking about the things that are not in the question, right? So what happened in the question, that's what we'd like to focus on. And then ceteris paribus would say, okay, based off of this question right here, nothing else changes. So in this question here, what is changing? Ceteris paribus, the only things that are changing are the increase in the wages of workers, and we're changing the preference for emails and letters. Okay, so the way I like to break this down is this. I'm going to write down what happened. The wages are increasing and the more emails. Okay, now here's the thing. You are probably thinking, because I've done it too, if, oh, wages go up, that means more income, that means more demand. And that is true, but is that the demand for the postal market? No, these are the wages for the postal workers. So in the postal market, what happened to the input prices? Is it more expensive now to send mail, to people? Yes, because your workers are paid more, you have to increase the input prices of the mail. So wages for the workers in the postal service market, the wages increase, and that's going to be like an increase in the input prices. So wages for the workers in the market, that's going to be the input prices going up. Make sense? Now, because the input prices are going up, it's more expensive to pay your workers. So what would you have to do? You would have to decrease your supply. Now, what about the increased demand for emails? Well, because you're demanding more emails, you're not using the postal service. So the demand will decrease for the postal service. So what's happening here? We're having a decrease in demand and a decrease in the supply. So let's do the 4 steps. Step 1 would have been to do price and quantity, and that would be S0, D0, P0, Q0, Then we have a decrease in the demand, so we're going to shift that to the left. And then we're going to have an increase in the supply, so now we're going to shift it to the right. So now we have D1 and S1. And you're probably wondering, well, now what do we do? Well, now, where is your new equilibrium? We're now at D1 and S1, so where is that handshake at? And that happens right here. Right there. So this is P1, and then this is Q1, which is the same as Q0. So in this scenario, because we're having this going on, we know that price goes down and quantity stays the same. Or what if I were to draw it a different way? What if I were to draw supply like this? Did supply increase? Yes, a little bit, right? And if supply increased a little bit, this is the equilibrium here. So look at what happened to price. Price still goes down, but what happened to quantity? Quantity goes down as well, right? Now, what if I were to do this? What if I were to decrease demand a little bit here? And now what happened to quantity? Quantity increased on this one, but what happened to price? Price definitely went down. So in all of these situations, I'm getting different answers for quantity, but I'm always getting the same answer for price. So based off of this information, like this is all we know, that demand decrease and supply decreases, since this is the only thing you know, quantity will be uncertain. But we do know what happens to price. Price, every time, no matter how we drew it, price definitely went down. Oh, I'm sorry, I went the wrong way. Let me start over. That still stays the same though, where if we have two situations going on, we are going to have something that is uncertain, and I'll show you in a second here. So supply goes down, so that means a shift to the left. Okay, and so now, well, this is going to be interesting then. So let's find the new equilibrium, which is right here. And what happened to price here? Well, price went down here. But what if I were to draw it differently? What if I were to do a decrease in the supply such as here? And now we have an equilibrium here where price goes up, quantity goes down. So we're having a situation where if we decrease supply to the left and we decrease demand to the left, we're having a situation where price could go up or price could go down. But in either way, quantity definitely went down. So like I said, mistakenly, is that whenever we have two situations going on, such as supply and demand both decreasing, we definitely know that quantity is going down and price is uncertain. So that is what's going on there when we have two shifts going on at the same time. Now, ceteris paribus, right? A shift in one curve never causes a shift in another curve. Rather, a shift in one curve causes a movement along the second curve. So basically, because demand shifts, that doesn't change your the supply curve. That's not what happens. What happened here was we had two different things going on. We had a situation where we changed the demand for the Postal Service, and then we had something that changed the supply for the Postal Service. Those were two different things. It wasn't, hey, because people are using less emails, we have to change the supply. That's not what's happening here. So what is happening is the fact that your demand's changing. That's going to have a movement on the supply curve. So let me go back and talk a little bit more about the shifts real quick. So if we were to have, let's see here, if we were to have a situation where we have demand up, we go here, here, we would shift the demand to the right, and then what you see here, we see that price definitely goes up and quantity goes up as well. What about demand down? What would happen to price? We would draw the curves. We would draw demand to the left. And you can see that price goes down, quantity goes down. And then, what about supply? And if supply goes up, that would mean we would shift the supply to the right, which would go there. And as you can see here, price definitely goes down and quantity goes up. Ooh. And quantity goes up. And then what if we had supply goes down? So that would be a shift to the left here. And then as you can see, price goes up, quantity goes down. So because supply goes down, price goes up, quantity goes down. So these are the 4 single shifts that are happening. So as you can see here, nothing is shifting the supply curve, right? I'm only changing the demand, and that changes the price and quantity. So what does that mean? I'm having a movement on the supply curve. I'm not changing the supply, I'm changing the quantity supplied. There's a big difference there. When I'm having a change in 2 things going on at the same time, such as the postal workers getting paid more and the demand for emails changing, that's where it gets tricky. So demand goes down, supply goes down. We're having less supply and then less demand. Then we're a little uncertain on some things. So on these, price is uncertain and quantity definitely goes down. But on this one, right, it wasn't because demand changes that changes supply. That's not what's going on here. We're having 2 separate situations. So the only way we have a movement is when there's a change in the price of a good. So because demand changes, that changes price, and then that is a movement on the supply curve. So basically, if you're not drawing a new demand curve or a new supply curve, you are having a movement, not a shift. And a change in price of the good is a movement. If it was a change in a substitute, that is a change in demand. But a change in price of the good, for instance, if we have the market for cars and the demand increases, which changes the price of the car, then we're going to have a movement because that was a change in the price of the good. The change in the price of the car had a movement on the supply curve. Here is an incorrect analysis of what's going on. If there was a drought, that would be a decrease in supply, right? Because maybe you're out on the farm and there's no rain, and if there's no rain, you're not able to make stuff, so less supply, and then that would shift supply to the left. And then what will happen to quantity? Okay, we're having less stuff, so quantity will go down, so a decrease in quantity. And because of that, what would happen? Well, I don't know either, so let's draw it. We would decrease the supply, and sure enough, it's going to be an increase in price. So we have an increase in price. Because of the increase in price, then farmers are more likely to supply the good. And you're wondering why more likely? Well, what happened to price? Price would go up, and then it's like, okay, well then they're going to supply more because like you can sell it for more. And if you're confused, great. Because this, again, is an incorrect analysis. Because there was a drought, you're having less supply, and that is why the price increases. Now, because the price is higher, this does not mean you're going to have more people selling things. So we're not going to have a situation where farmers are more likely to supply the good, which will increase the supply to the right. And then because of the price increase, because of the price decrease, then this will increase the demand, So this will be a shift. This is an incorrect analysis. The only thing that we do know is that a drought happened, and that is only thing that happened. We have a higher price and a lower quantity. You do not make all of these shifts happen at the same time. It's only this right here. That's where it stops. Okay? So again, this is an incorrect analysis. You do not need to go through all of these steps to get to there. The only thing you need to do is what happened to supply, what happened to price and quantity. That's what you need to do. So in the next section, we will be discussing price controls, which are pretty interesting. But the main thing is these four things right here. Is when the demand or supply changes, how does that change the equilibrium? You will have to draw the graph and label everything. I need you to know where it's shifting, and I also need to see what's going on. Just because you draw two lines, right? I don't know what's going on there. So draw some arrows to let me know, hey, it's increasing, hey, it's decreasing. Now, not only is that going to help me understand where you're understanding it, but it's also going to help you visualize where it's going. That way, we won't get confused on some things. Okay? So, I'll see you in the next video.